very positive evening. The evening is divided into 3 parts. There's opening statements, there's a series of questions that the candidates will respond to, and then there are closing statements. I ask that the audience please make sure that they are on mute. The 2 candidates for the Maplewood Township Committee, the Democratic representative, for the primary. New Jersey has a closed primary. That means that only registered Democrats will be allowed to vote in the Democratic primary. And the winner of the Democratic primary will be facing an opponent, Republican or independent opponent, come November. Laura Wiss is going to be our timekeeper. And for each particular section, the candidates will know when their time is almost up so they can wrap it up and end as close as possible so we can move on to the next question. When 30 seconds are left, they will see the 30-second sign. When their time is up, they will see the stop sign. I will allow them to complete their thought before moving on. Okay, part number 1 for tonight's program, opening statements. And Ms. Engel will be going first. She will have 2 minutes which to make the opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Deborah Engel. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight and for all of you for being here. I am a mom of 3 daughters, an 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old. I moved to Maplewood, it'll be 13 years ago this June, with my husband, Matt, and I've opened 2 businesses since I've lived here. Work and Play in South Orange, which was one of the first co-working spaces of the world to also offer a licensed daycare center on site, and the co-retail space General Store Cooperative on Springfield Avenue in Maplewood. I decided to run for Township Committee because I believe it is important to have all voices represented on our local government. I represent families with young children and I represent business owners, but I want to make sure you know that I believe it is equally important to ensure the needs of seniors and families without children are met as well. I believe one of my greatest skills is the ability to listen, to hear and understand diverse points of views. I'm a community builder, as shown by the businesses that I created. I bring people together, and you can't bring people together and create community without listening and understanding different needs. I am an independent thinker. I take in information and weigh how each decision will affect different people. I bring stakeholders to the table when it is a decision that will individually affect them. And I've proven by my business concepts that I think innovatively. I also believe we need to normalize the conversation around mental health and create programs that make supports, evaluations, and preventative measures more available and accessible. It is really hard when you're in a mental health crisis to find a provider that takes your insurance or who has availability to see you. I think there are opportunities to create low cost or no cost programs that will help all of our residents. Thank you again for being here tonight, and I look forward to sharing more about me throughout the evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kiley.
Hello, thank you, Marlene, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for hosting the candidate debate. League of Women Voters has been an essential part of democracy, engaging and informing voters for over 100 years, and that continues tonight. I'd like to thank the residents who are joining tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces out there that I've worked with in the past for showing up and being part of the process. And I'd like to thank Deb for stepping up and running for the Township Committee for all the work that she's already done for Maplewood. It's people like Deb that step up and make a difference in our town. First, as you can tell, I'm a little congested. I am just getting over COVID. And I might be taking a lot of breaths all along the way. And this actually will help disguise my fear of public speaking, because you don't know if it's a fear or if I'm out of breath. All right, so let's start with me. My name is Kurt Kiley. I live with my wife, Carol, in the Pinkbird neighborhood. We are 11-year residents of Maplewood. I grew up 2 towns over in a working class family in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Our family lived in a 2-story house with my grandparents living above. We live between a Catholic church and a cookie factory. Our lives could have been plucked out of a Bruce Springsteen song. In my professional life, I'm a consultant and I work with manufacturers in many different industries and supply chain optimization. I like being hands-on and building things. I have a master's degree in management from NJIT. I am actively involved in Maplewood and have been almost since we moved here. I got involved advocating for seniors alongside Irene Dunsavage. We formed Maplewood Senior Share to help inform local policy on senior issues. That's where I really got the hook for serving Maplewood. I believe everything we learned as part of the Senior Share and as well as being the chair of the Senior Advisory Committee is really applicable to the rest of people in Maplewood. And I will stop.
Okay, thank you. The second portion of tonight's program are questions. And Mr. Kiley, you're going to be going first. The candidates will have 1 minute in which to respond to the question. At 30 seconds, you will see the 30-second sign. At the end of the minute, you will say the stop sign. Again, finish your thought. After both candidates have responded to the question, I will ask whether either of the candidates has some more information they wish to share or to rebut what their opponent has said. So we move along. And Mr. Kiley, you're going to answer this question first. During your opening, you had a chance to present your skills and experiences in the town. So the question asks, with which department or departments do you feel you are most qualified to work and why?
Okay, I'm going to try to speak up because I think I'm a low talker and it's not helping anybody or myself. So I'm going to try to speak up on that. So the three departments would be engineering, DPW, and recreation. And engineering DPW is because really my background is with manufacturing, heavy industry, all sorts of things. I'm very familiar with that aspect of it. And there's a lot of opportunity in Maplewood because we need to start looking at improving our infrastructure, making it more resilient. And I think there's areas where we can actually make Maplewood more affordable by focusing on these areas. I also want to focus on the recreation department so that I can continue the work that I did with the Senior Advisory Committee, as well as promoting senior issues to make Maplewood a more age-friendly town and age for all ages. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Engel.
I think I'm qualified to work with a lot of departments and committees because as a small business owner, I'm used to doing everything from managing the budget to creating programming to pushing out communications. If I had to pick one area, I think I'm most qualified to work in economic development due to my small business experience, my advocacy efforts on behalf of the small business community during the COVID shutdowns in 2020, and my 3.5 years experience on the leadership team of South Orange Downtown, which is an organization like Maplewood Village Alliance or Springfield Avenue Partnership. I also think my experience lends value to the community service and recreation departments because I did own a licensed child care center and camp program. And I hear my community talking about the need for more aftercare, affordable child care, and camp options, and for giving every child access to swim lessons. I also hear the seniors in our community asking for more outdoor activities. But I'm a team player and I'm going to help and pitch in wherever I'm needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Engel, you're going to be answering the second question first, which reads, development is an ongoing topic in town. There's a fine line between keeping the personality and tenor of the community and the need for development for Maplewood's present and future needs. How do you reconcile balancing these two considerations in 1 minute?
Thank you. When thinking about development, I can't help but think about our upcoming master plan update. The master plan is a guide of our community goals and aspirations, and it's updated about every 10 years. I believe in smart development, providing more affordable housing and adding different types of housing inventory so that all who called Maplewood their home have the ability to stay here and so that we can have a multi-generational and socioeconomic diverse community. It is also super important to ensure that residents in the neighborhoods affected by development are part of the conversations. What do they want to see? What are their concerns? And how does it impact them? When looking at individual development projects, I think independent traffic studies are important, not just the ones that are paid for by the developer, as well as studies on how development impacts infrastructure, like our sewer systems, our schools, and our environment. How are we replacing those trees that are coming down? I also think we can look at adding green spaces and community spaces in our development projects, much like our sister town South Orange is doing, with a new incubator space, maker space, and community meeting rooms being carved into 3 of their development projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kiley, same question.
Thank you. So with all development, I think we need to start with the lead question is what makes Maplewood a destination and focus everything around that. I think we need to be a destination for the arts. I'm just suggesting that because that seems to be in our wheelhouse, either a destination for arts or an incubator for arts. We're looking at the built out structure. I think the most important thing is make sure that with the infrastructure that we're building is actually we're building a place, a space that is very attractive that people want to be in. Attracts people and it becomes a development, so people can actually want to be there, whether there's services or not. If you look at all the developments that are being revitalized, they're all built before 1930, and there's a certain aspect about that because they couldn't advertise on TV, and they had to sell through their windows, and they don't rely on this. All right.
You could finish your thought if you need to.
Okay, can I grab 10 seconds? So they had to sell through their windows, right? And that made the whole thing interesting. They had to bring people in and make the whole walking space interesting. And that's where I was trying to go. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Kiley, you'll be doing question number 3 first. And the question asks, how do you feel about retaining the current outdoor dining spaces in Maplewood Village going forward? How would you balance business needs, town ambiance, parking, pedestrian needs, deliveries, etc.?
Okay, so I support continuing the streeteries and maintaining the pedestrian promenade in the village during the evening. They add to the placemaking that I just mentioned before. Before the ordinance for these streeteries expires, we should have some community meetings to get feedback from residents and business owners. We will need some formal zoning changes and uniform design standards. It's important for me that streeteries comply with the ADA and are barrier-free and accessible for people with disabilities. I think Ani Rahman and Abel Baker may have been the only streeteries that were barrier-free. Others would have to navigate the curb, which becomes exclusionary for those with mobility issues. Design standards be uniform and appealing, but allow enough leeway for businesses to add to their personality to it. As other towns are going through the same transition, we have a lot of resources to draw on to get this right. We should also be looking at parklets, streeteries, cousins, and ensure all neighborhoods, not just the village, have access to these things.
Thank you. Ms. Engel.
Outdoor dining saves our businesses, many of which are owned by local residents, from closing during the pandemic. Many of our residents want to dine out, but still don't feel comfortable eating indoors. COVID is still here, as seen by our increasing numbers. We don't know much about long COVID, and our youngest children are still not eligible for vaccines. I have heard that Maplewood officials are discussing design guidelines for outdoor dining spaces. And I think once those guidelines are created, it will help create a more pleasing look to the outdoor dining spaces that have popped up since 2020. Parking has always been an issue in Maplewood, even before COVID. And I know this as I consulted with Maplewood a few years ago on a parking information plan, calling attention to available evening and weekend spots by MMS and on the park side of the train station. The rise of companies like Uber and Lyft will help with our parking inventory as more people take advantage of these ride shares. And the short-term drop-off, pickup, delivery zones that have been added during the pandemic are a great thing. It is also important to hear what businesses want when considering outdoor dining and ensuring they are part of all conversations that affect their storefronts. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving to the next question. Ms. Engel, you go first. And the question deals with your perspective on Irvington Town Avenue development plan between Newark, Maplewood, and South Orange. What is your perspective?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about development in general. It's super important to ensure that residents in the neighborhoods affected are part of the conversations. What do they want to see? What are their concerns? How is it going to impact them? In the case of Irvington Avenue, it's interesting as the corridor really does touch 3 different towns. So coordination between all the municipalities and residents involved is important. It's also important as we think about pedestrian safety as children are walking to schools, and it's a chance to create community with our neighboring Essex County towns. It's also a chance to continue to come together for grant opportunities like the Streetscape Improvement Grant awarded to the 3 towns from the county in 2019. And the next phase of plans include new sidewalks, street crossings, lighting, and street furniture. A new pizza place recently opened, and there's other things coming along with a cannabis business that has applied for licensure. So I'll again mention the importance of independent traffic studies because they are so important while keeping all residents that are there engaged and informed and part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kiley.
Thank you. So the Irvington Avenue development, also known as Maplewood Corners in the document, has been active for quite some time. The most recent plan I have access to is from 2014. I think there are some exciting opportunities for placemaking in that area to make that area space more than just an intersection. There are some hurdles and they're in the document. The perception of safety, the study says that 34% of the people that responded felt the area was not safe during the day, and 50% felt the word was safe at night. The shops have steel roll-up doors to add to the lack of safety feel around there. The report recommends a special interest, a SID improvement district, but the owners don't have time to participate, and they also are satisfied with the district as is. We risk gentrification. This area is very international district with a lot of foreign-born residents in it that it serves. And if we improve it, we don't want to displace those small business owners.
Okay. More information or follow-up or rebuttal? Okay, moving on then. Okay. Ms. Engel, you get the next question as well first, and the question says, our community has faced discrimination, racism, sexism, and other isms are causing deep divisions. Our community supports rising above divisiveness. As an elected official, what actions do you support and what actions would you add to help heal Maplewood?
Thank you. I'd like to focus on training when we talk about all types of discrimination. You don't know what you don't know, and you can't know unless you learn it. I support mandatory anti-racism and bias training for all township employees and volunteers. The Community Coalition on Race offers training for local businesses, and it's fantastic. I've taken it. And we should always educate our community when they see something, speak up. We should also look at training to work with neurodiverse individuals and to create inclusive language for our LGBTQ+ community. We should provide mandatory sexual harassment training for all employees and volunteers who work with our youth and who are community forward facing. I start by taking an audit on what trainings are currently happening and who is participating, and then we can look at what changes or additions need to be made. Bad things are going to happen in our world and our state, and unfortunately in our community. We need to ensure there are existing channels created for people who are harmed so they know they can safely speak up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kiley.
Thank you. I feel Maplewood is the embodiment of be the change you want to see in the world. Through our festivals and cultural events, we celebrate the diversity of our residents and share in their unique contributions. Mayor DeLuca has signed on to the Mayor's Compact to combat hate, extremism, and bigotry. When any group is attacked, we repudiate the oppressor and show solidarity with the oppressed. We intentionally diversify our boards and committees to accurately reflect the broader community. There may be things that need to be improved, but I think Maplewood is doing a good job in this respect. I support what we have done in the past and believe we should continue these efforts in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Kiley, you will be answering this question first, and it reads, There is a racial imbalance in our elementary schools because they are neighborhood schools. Is there a way to encourage more mixed housing in the school districts, as well as promoting more affordable housing throughout the township?
Okay, that is not the question that I got.
Oh.
Was there another one?
Well, basically that was the gist of the question. I know the question started off with talking about the disparity of Black and brown students versus white students in AP classes. And when that
Yes.
question came up, I said, dealing with inequities in classes is a Board of Ed issue. And I was told, well, that was just the preamble, but the main gist of the question deals with integrating neighborhoods and affordable housing.
Okay, well, that's not the question that was provided or the gist for me. So
Oh,
we're gonna get
okay.
we're gonna get a little bit of answer that's a little bit different. All right.
Okay, that's fine.
But
That's fine.
along those lines.
Okay.
All right, so for me, this is a discussion on the education gap and what we could do on the township level to try to address that. And I think the education gap is a critical issue, right? And I'm working with, and I'm committed to working and collaborating with the Board of Ed, to effectively implement the intentional integration plan. But at the township level, I think it is imperative to break down economic barriers that are holding back our community of color. For example, prior to the integration plan, Seth Boarding School was 77% non-white and 44% free and reduced lunch. Low-income households do not have the same access to educational resources that affluent families do. I know this from firsthand experience. I grew up free and reduced lunch, low-income family. We fortunately had a library branch right by us, and that's what got me out of that, right? We need to look at how we can bring additional educational resources to those neighborhoods. We've already started doing something like that with our municipal Wi-Fi to try to level the playing field. So let's try to do the same things with the library. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Engel.
Yeah, well, I agree that the first part of the question we were provided was geared more towards the school board. And it is what the intentional integration plan was designed to address. And I do think that housing is a first step, but I think the township can break down barriers in other ways too. For example, providing access to our pool and swim lessons for all, looking at our recreational fees, creating more access and equity in our sports programs, especially because we don't have sports in our middle schools. And to create access to affordable behavioral health programs. It is really hard and expensive to get mental health for all ages. I also think that the Township Committee should look for ways to encourage more diversity in our township events. One of my favorite events at Tuscan School was International Night, held in pre-COVID times. And it was an event that celebrated all different types of cultures by introducing food, music, and dance. Families would sign up potluck style to bring their a dish that represented from their culture. Like I used to bring kugel since I'm Jewish. And there was music and dance of all types. It really brought children and parents together in an accessible way to learn about each other's traditions and cultures. Perhaps we can explore more ways to have integrated programming that highlights all of our cultures. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next question, Mr. Kiley, you'll be going first on this question as well. Tragically, a Maplewood resident was swept into a storm sewer in a recent storm and died. With climate change causing more frequent and severe storms, how should the town be proactive to prevent more tragic deaths, damage, and loss?
Yes, this is important. Irene, Sandy, Ida, all these storms expose Maplewood's vulnerability to extreme weather events. We need to look at three things: the power grid, stormwater management, and emergency shelter. Long-term, the power grid needs to be upgraded to support our transition to all electric. Let's take this opportunity to get the power lines out of our tree canopy, right? And underground where they will be safe, right? We might not be able to do it all over town, but we should look for these opportunities. Stormwater management, we need a long-term solution. I believe short-term, we need to focus on keeping the storms clear during hurricane season. see where we can expand capacity long-term. Finally, emergency shelter. If another sandy occurs and we are without electricity and heat during the dead of winter, we're going to be in big Texas-sized trouble. So we need to ensure that our municipal buildings, school buildings can all provide temporary shelter, backup power and heat, extended outage. And finally, the DPW are first responders in this type of weather disaster, and we should be treating them as such with support and training.
Thank you. Ms. Engel.
Thank you. Well, first, I want to send condolences to the family, as this should never have happened. We need to be more proactive on assessing our infrastructure and plan for the future, and the master plan gives us a chance to do that. We can think about our green spaces and drainage, how we're replacing trees that are being torn down from development. We also should have a running list of our needs so that when government funding or grants become available, we can be ready to apply for them. And then I think that we should be celebrating that Maplewood is the home of the first zero waste refill shop with Good Bottle refill shop on Springfield Avenue. Residents can make little changes on their own by refilling versus buying more and more plastic. Recycling is not the way to combat climate change. Reducing waste and encouraging reuse is. We should also be looking at compost programs like the pilot program that Maplewood now has with Job as Compost. I hear new residents talking about free composting pickup in Brooklyn, and I'd like to explore how we can do that here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next question, Ms. Engel, you will answer it first. And the question reads, how would you deal with the public demand to remove reading or viewing materials from the public library? Can you think of any circumstance in which the town should limit public access to any particular reading or viewing materials? And if so, in what circumstances?
I honestly can't imagine Maplewoodians demanding censorship in our public library since we live in such a progressive town, but I'm against censorship. I'm a journalist and believe in the First Amendment. If the library board does move in that direction, I would fight it. I believe all materials should be available for reading and viewing. If there is a controversy about material here in Maplewood, then I would look to an education plan. Why are people wanting to censor or keep it from people seeing it? What's the other side? Why do people think it's important for residents to be able to read and watch the piece? I would encourage conversation, but I don't think there should be any limits on content available to library patrons. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kiley.
I am on the same page with Deb there. I'm strongly against censorship, and I would strongly resist any attempts to remove or restrict books or any content from the library. I'm having a difficult time envisioning a scenario where I would support limiting access to material. If the concern is underage children having access to sexualized content, I would suggest a library is not the outlet a parent needs to worry about. If it does come down to that, we do need to have community conversation to find out why it wants to be removed. But I, as on principle, am very strongly against any forms of restricting speech or censorship. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next question, Mr. Kiley, you'll be going first. And the question is the following. The COVID-19 pandemic is slowly becoming endemic. What steps should the Township Committee adopt for monitoring and responding to COVID in the next few years?
And I happen to be the one that's having COVID at the moment. Great. So we are moving towards the endemic stage, and that means that the support systems that were put in place by the state and the county are slowly being dismantled. And it makes it difficult for us to track these things. Also, people are using rapid tests. I think using rapid tests, people aren't, reporting back the test responses, right? So we don't know if they're reporting positive or negative. And if they're reporting a negative, I think there's a lot of false negatives. I think one of the things we need to do right away is to coordinate between the Board of Ed and the Maplewood Board of Health. After watching a couple Township Committee meetings, there seems to be a lot of miscommunication. And if there's an outbreak happening in the schools, we need to announce that to the whole town, right? Not just to parents, because I don't have kids in school, so I wouldn't have known it unless I was watching the Township Committee meeting about this. Because I think since we're dismantling these existing systems, we need a simplified way for people that are testing to report. This could be online or through a scanner app. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Engel.
Thank you. Well, I would like to acknowledge the rise in cases. This is far from being over, and also to acknowledge that we've lost a lot of Maplewood residents to COVID. We need to continue regular monitoring and regular community education. And I also want to acknowledge that we do have pandemic fatigue. It's been 2 long years. The biggest thing that Township Committee officials can do is have patience, understanding, kindness, compassion, and we're going to get through this. I think our Township Committee needs to be listening to all of our residents, those who feel comfortable emerging to the world maskless, and those who are more COVID conservative. And we need to respect all individuals, their opinions, and their needs. As Kurt said, I also believe our township and school district need to do a better job communicating to each other and the public. I am a parent, and I only know about the outbreaks in schools because I'm watching the same meetings Kurt is. Parents are really confused. I was surprised by the many voices that came to that Board of Health meeting. Nobody is getting the information on how to be responsible. I hope that the committee meetings between our municipalities and school board continue and are productive and can help unify one message to our entire community of all ages. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Engel, you get the next question to answer first. How effective have the recent changes in the police department been in improving their relationship with the community? How would you judge the current relationship between the police department and the community? And what further steps should be taken moving forward?
First, I would like to applaud the efforts of the Community Board and Police. I especially want to commend them for the hiring of the new crisis intervention social worker. It was a program they recommended, and I think is very needed. I support more social workers working with our first responders on crisis calls and preventative care. We still have a lot of work to do as a community, but I want to acknowledge that the department under the new administration has made an effort to engage with and listen to the community. They care about our residents, they care about our children. We have a diverse force, and a lot of officers hired grew up here or around here and take pride in serving our community. A way to better help our community is to add more neurodiverse training, more de-escalation and use of force training, and develop other community-based channels of conflict resolution, such as expanding the restorative justice programs and building a community mediation program to help when there are challenges among neighbors. We should also be working collaboratively across all departments and with the community on improved traffic and lighting design to ensure we have safe streets for pedestrians and cyclists. Thank you.
Thank you. Before Mr. Kiley responds, I do want to ask the audience, if you have a question that has not been covered this evening, you may submit it into the chat. And now we will hear from Mr. Kiley about the police department.
Thank you. Thank you. Maplewood has made incredible strides since the July 5th incident where Maplewood officers were reported kicking teens in the head. The new police chief, who is respected, genuinely appears concerned with rebuilding the trust and relationship between the police department and residents. We have formed the Community Board of Police to increase transparency and advocate for the community and their relationship to the police. The department embraces community policing and de-escalation. Transparency has been improved when violent crimes occur. I believe these are all positive developments. Beyond how I feel, I think it's important on issues like these to perform community outreach. We need to get feedback from across all neighborhoods to see if residents are aware of these changes and if they feel they are having a positive effect. And if not, let's adjust course. We need to objective measures to measure our progress. One of the areas I think we can improve on, obviously, is the scanner. Every time that thing goes down, we are losing the trust that we're built. If we need to put a secondary channel on that, let's do that. But other than that, I think overall, we're making forward progress.
Thank you. Michelle, do you see any questions in the chat? I don't. Oh, okay, so We move on to the third part of our program, and third and final part of our program for this evening, and those are the closing statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes in which to make a closing statement. And we start with Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Marlene. And thank you, everybody. Thanks, Deb. This has been a great informative discussion and exchange of ideas. I think we've really hit on a lot of topics, and we've come up with a lot of good ideas on how to bring Maplewood forward. I think that Maplewood Township Committee has a role to be filled with someone with my technical background and expertise. Really didn't get into a lot of that, but that is where my strengths lie. Through my work on the Senior Advisory Committee, I demonstrated to be someone that works with the community, has set priorities, and collaborates with everybody in the team for the best outcome. For me, facts and data matter. I really like to dig into things. Like you saw, I dug into the actual plan for Maplewood Corners to see what was in it. And I like to understand root cause and get a balance and different outcome. With me, you will get somebody that shows up prepared. That seems to be very important these days. Works hard and has the best interest for everybody in Maplewood. I ask for your vote on June 7th, and I will work hard for you, and I will work hard for everybody in Maplewood. And it would be my privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Engel.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight. Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for hosting, and for Kurt for engaging in this conversation with me. I'd like to use my closing remarks as a chance to talk more about my passion, which is making mental health supports, evaluation, and preventative measures more affordable and accessible to all people in our community. I believe we can do this through low-cost and no-cost programs. For example, I'd like to create a peer-to-peer network so those in crisis, or parents of those in crisis, or children of those in crisis have a network of trusted people that they can turn to for help in finding providers or programs that can help them. I'd like to create a centralized database of resources on our town website to make those resources easier to find and in one stop. And I'd like to offer behavioral health first aid trainings so our residents can see the signs when their friend or neighbor or child or parent is struggling. Last, I'd like to explore partnerships with existing nonprofit organizations to bring their programs to our residents. If we are able to provide physical health checks such as flu shots, blood sugar tests, and other things, we can provide mental health checks too. The effects of the pandemic are widespread, resulting in isolation for all ages, from our young children who need opportunities for socialization and social emotional learning, to our seniors who need safe programming and connection, and to the sandwich generation who are supporting all age groups and balancing their own mental health needs as well. All of our residents need kind and compassionate local government leaders who will listen without judgment and who will bring our community together. Thank you again for being here. I hope you'll vote for me on June 7th, and I look forward to getting to know all of you better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates for their time and their presentation of their positions on the issues. Thank you to the audience members for wanting to become educated voters. I do want to say, I know both candidates mentioned about Election Day on June 7th. There are 2 other ways of voting. You have already received a vote by mail ballot if you have requested one for this particular election, or if you have requested vote by mail ballots for all elections. I do want to point out that there is a drop box at the Hilton Library. You can also mail in your vote by mail ballot. Please make sure it is postmarked by June 7th. There's also early voting. Early voting locations can be found on your county website. It is also found on your sample ballots, which usually come out 10 days prior to the election. Early voting will take place June 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And again, early voting is in-person voting. You vote on the machine, or I should say machine voting as well. But both for regular or even provisional voting, you do vote on the machine. for early voting. And then, of course, is the traditional election day, June 7th. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on election day. Those polling places are your traditional polling places. And again, you will find that on your sample ballot. It is not the same polling places as the early voting polling places. Those are two separate things. So again, please exercise your right to vote. It's a very important right that we have here in the United States. Thank you again to the candidates, to the league, to the Democratic Committee who helped organize this as well. And again, good evening from the league. Thank you.
Thank you.